All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. A special thank you to the punctual crowd showing right up at 11. We're going to give it just a little bit of time because the ranks are swelling. We're watching people pour in here. So everybody is currently muted, and use this small sliver to run to the lobby and get yourself a treat before we get started here. Seeing lots of my old utility colleagues from the Bonneville days on here. Shout out to Tri-Cities. Idaho Power, well represented. Great to see you, Idaho Power. See some program implementers on here. We love our program implementer partners. Ooh, special guest all the way from Rhode Island. Gotta appreciate how we're making the connection here.
Well, John, looks like 1 minute after 11, so maybe let's get going.
I think this is the transition time. Let's make sure these people are on the right flight before we get going here.
All right, welcome everybody. You are hearing Katie Sealing at the Lighting Design Lab, and you are in the Networked Lighting Controls for Utilities course today, presented by, who I hope you see, John Wilson. Many of you, I think, know. And today's June 2nd, by the way. During the webinar, you will all be muted. However, we've got the chat function active, so go ahead and ask questions through there. I will give them to John as he takes some pauses during the presentation, but it is going to be a fast hour, I think. And he's got a couple of fun polls during the presentation, so please take those as well. At the end, there's going to be a short survey, and we will put the recording of this, it is being recorded, on our website, along with the slide deck, which there's 5 handouts that you can access right now over in your menu if you want to download those, but we'll also have them on our webpage. And there's just our general email address if you've got questions after the presentation. And want to take a minute to remind you, this is the Lighting Design Lab, and we are powered by Seattle City Light. We wouldn't exist without them. We are all City Light employees, actually. Excuse me. And we are operated by Seattle City Light. So thank you, Seattle City Light. This specific webinar has a special sponsor today that we'd like to recognize, and let's thank the members of the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance for their support. They're funding today's event as part of the Regional Luminaire Level Lighting Controls Initiative. And a reminder, luminaire level lighting controls are NLC, and they've done a lot of great work building market awareness around LLLC. If you are interested in learning more about LLLC and existing resources that support the market, we encourage you to click this link if you download the PDF. You can't click it right now, and check what they've got available on the Better Bricks website. And just super quick, we've been around for about 30 years. We reach a really wide swath of the industry, end-use customers, trade allies, design allies, all from beginners to the most experienced. We believe that this approach to educating customers and market professionals is the key to successful market transformation. And beyond the education and training that you're taking part in today, we also do technology evaluation. You may have seen in our latest email a collaboration with the Lighting Research Center on some parking lot controls, lighting controls. And we create tools and resources for you and aggregate information like the Light Fair International webinars we've done. And without further ado, let's get this started because John has a lot to say in this hour. Take it away, John.
All right. Thank you so much, Katie. I really appreciate it. And hello to everybody joining us, not just from around the great Pacific Northwest, but looking at the attendee list, we got some representation from all over the country. So really appreciate folks carving out time to be with us today. Just a little bit about me for those of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting or working with yet. I've made my career working directly for utilities, implementing lighting programs predominantly, working in the energy efficiency space more broadly. At the Lighting Design Lab, I have a really terrific job where I get to work not only with the great, diverse, and multi-talented team at City Light, but also with utilities all over the region. And I get to kind of help share, and bring their interests and needs to the table, as well as what City Light's trying to get done. We get to work with industry partners, like, major manufacturers, distributors out there getting the work done. And we get to work with strategic partners, like the specific sponsor of today's show, the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance. So it's a really cool job. And probably my favorite part is the fact that I get to work more broadly than just one given service territory, because the compounded effects that we have when we all work together, it's just really cool what we can get done. And, getting to work with all of you makes it great. So that's a quick something about me. But before we go too much further here, let's take a quick poll so I can learn a little something about you all. So we're going to do a quick poll. We're going to have a few of these that you're going to take throughout the day. We're going to leave this open just for a little bit. I know not everybody on this call works for a utility, and that's cool. We kind of changed it up. It's not just NLC for utility staff. It's NLC for utilities, because utilities rely on program partners. Industry, they rely on, other organizations. So we wanted to broaden that just a little bit. So we'll leave the poll open for a little bit. The answers are pouring in. I want to make it clear that if you could vote by mail, I would support that 100%. Right now, we need you to vote through the computer. And the numbers are pouring in. We're going to go ahead and close this. I'm not going to leave a ton of time up for this just because we got a lot of polls today, and then looks like we got a majority of responses here. So let me share those results real quick. Majority program implementers. That's awesome. That's my background. That's kind of going to be our focus here. But, you can't implement the programs without having, a solid foundation, being proficient in the technical side. So looks like we have a pretty good engineering, emerging tech cohort with us. We've got a couple folks on the program oversight side, which is one of the most important sides and something we're going to dedicate time to in this presentation. A handful of customer service folks and a handful of energy czars. So pretty diverse group here. I think we're going to be touching on topics that appeal to everyone. So let's take that down. And this is just a real special, we got a special guest here today, folks, getting us back going here. I got to say, I got my little daughter watching from Grandpa and Grandma's house today. So I want to say hi, Sonia. I hope you're watching. Special thank you to all the Grandpa and Grandmas out there helping provide childcare where you can. Also, special thanks to my wonderful wife who battled Comcast and got really awesome internet service through our house. So you can all be looking at my face in high def, hopefully, and hear me clearly. So thank you to all the people supporting me to get this done. All right. What are we talking about here today? We just have an hour here today, folks. I had to battle all the awesome things I wanted to bring to the table with the fact that usually for utility staff, 1 hour is the sweet spot that you get to really hold their attention. And so I kind of teed this up. This is like, there's I'm going to show that I'm not of this age, actually. I know there's big records and there's little records, and they spin at different speeds. I think that's how people refer to them. Today, because we got so much to talk about, we're kind of on the small record, right? The Lighting Design Club, we have amazing courses that go way more into depth on all these topics that you see up here. Every single one of these could basically be its own course. What I really hope to accomplish today is to tee these topics up, give you a general understanding of why they're important, how they relate to you as utility staff, but also why they are important to industry. And then bring to your awareness and attention that if you would like more information on any of these topics, the Lighting Design Lab is a really great resource for that. And we are here to serve, our member utilities and make that happen. So marching forward, we're going to start with understanding some key concepts that are just critical. These are like the key concepts and sometimes tech terms that I see people just getting hung up on really early in a lot of these conversations. And so I want to prevent folks from getting high-centered. And probably the most common one I hear, like right out of the gate, folks will often have a visceral reaction, especially if it's a customer, is, wait, it's on my network? I don't want something on my network. I don't want to jeopardize the security of my network. How is that going to work? And I like to emphasize to folks right off the bat, many NLC systems. In fact, if we're talking just to keep it kind of in the parlance and framework of retrofit type products, a majority, you could say, of those systems operate on their own network, okay? They're either communicating via router or from device to device to set up their own network, and it's totally separate and not connected to your main business server and that network, and so you can keep them completely separate. What works really well is that increasingly more and more of these enterprise type systems, these whole building systems, can integrate with these smaller networks you might have started with. So you might have you retrofitted one wing of a building and you put in system A. Well, later, if you want to do the rest of that building and you're using system A's sort of like big kid brother system, increasingly those enterprise systems can integrate with the local sort of room by room system. So that's really cool and hopefully allays some of that concern right off the bat. The next thing I want to talk about, this is probably the second most common point of confusion that I will hear people talk about, and it's very understandable because it's pretty confusing. I'm going to take just a very brief moment to talk about two different types of protocols. And before I even go there, this is a great reminder that joining us on the call is one of our senior lighting specialists from Lighting Design Lab, Sean Dara. Sean is on this call to help me out if I get myself into a technical corner and I've boxed myself in. And I'm reminded that Sean's on this call because he was really the one that helped straighten me out on this particular topic. So the communication protocol is the how, okay? The communication protocol is what is allowing two or more devices to transmit information. And so the wireless examples that we hear about and that are most common are Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or Zigbee, and yes, even cellular network signals, okay? And here's where the point of confusion is. A lot of times people who know about lighting, they've been involved with lighting for some time, they'll hear somebody say like, well, this system, it's a Wi-Fi system, or this system is Bluetooth. And then I'll hear them say something like, well, how does that compare with 0 to 10? Or how does that compare with Dolly? And 0 to 10 or Dolly are examples of load control protocols. Those are like the what, right? The load control protocol is the content in the message being communicated, okay? And so if I was talking to like my daughter and trying to explain it to her, I might say the communication protocol is the road, and the load control protocol is the little blue truck on the road, going down the road with all its goods, headed to the city, headed to the farm. Any of you who have kids know where that's going. Okay, so that's protocols with a super broad brush. Next thing I want to talk about is some of the confusion that may still exist about LLLC, luminaire level lighting controls, versus NLC, network lighting controls. And this one's pretty easy, especially when you put a picture on it, which we're going to do. Luminaire level lighting controls are network lighting controls, okay? The LLLC variety just means every single fixture has the integrated sensors, it has a load controller, and it is individually addressable, meaning every single luminaire is addressable. And the way that I really like to explain it to people, to keep it simple with a picture, is to say network lighting controls are a one-to-many relationship, okay? You have, one sensor could be controlling many luminaires. With LLLC, it's a one-to-one relationship, right? Every single fixture has everything integrated. And when we think about the ubiquitous smartphones that we all have in our pockets or on our desks right now, there is no doubt in my mind, the system, we are going to end up in an LLLC world, right? We're not there right now. In fact, I'm going to show you later, we're like halfway there. About 50% of the products on the market are the LLLC variety. And that number is only going to go up. We're not going to see it go the other direction. But hopefully this clears up confusion that might have existed. It's really not LLLC versus NLC. It's more like a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not a square. Okay, now I'm going to get into a couple tech terms, and these are going to kind of build on each other a little bit. I want to talk about wall stations, right? Wall stations are what we formally refer to as the wall switch. And just because old habits die hard, like colloquially, it's a really hard word for me to say, we're probably going to keep calling these things wall switches for like another 20 years, right? It's going to be like, my daughter will hear me saying it still on accident, and she might even still use that term. But eventually, we're all going to just call these wall stations, or who knows, they might have some other really cool term for us by then. Wall stations are what's on the wall. They are often programmable in these modern NLC systems, and they may or may not include scenes. And we're going to build on this in a second. The other thing I like, we've all experienced this before, that when you look at wall stations, you will see some that are very, very simple, like the one you see on the left there, and it has very limited functionality or capabilities. And then sometimes you will see some that are controlling multiple zones with multiple scenes. The wall station is more complex, but it allows a lot of flexibility. And you all remember the parable of the young woman and the porridge, and it's like probably somewhere in the middle there, it's just right. So stay tuned. We're going to talk about this one more as we go forward. The next tech term and basic concept I want to talk with you about in lighting is scene, because increasingly you are going to see more and more scenes, and scene-based lighting most commonly manifests for people at the wall station. So you see an example here in the picture where the wall station has scenes labeled on it, and you see in the table a representation of what those scenes mean, like how they've been programmed. And one of the things I love to illustrate to people is, even when you just had the wall station, you had two scenes. Scene 1 was 100%, and we should call it scene 0 was 0%. And this is just a great example. You can see here, on-off, the on-off button has been programmed in this example to be 50% on, right? Like when you push on, you don't need to bring the lights 100% up. Now you have a full lights option that is programmed to that, but more commonly, you don't need 100% of the light. So just a great example of where these are going and how scenes, this concept of like, they're just presets. They're preset light levels. You're going to see this continue to proliferate. And it's a key concept, because many of these network lighting control systems, the way that they are programmed and set up is based on scenes. So this is going to be a common sort of reoccurring motif that we'll run into. The next tech term I want to talk about is sequence of operations. Key concept, technical term. The sequence of operations is how the system designer communicates intent. Now, there are a lot of different ways that you can put this together. It can be in Excel, it can be in Word. It doesn't have to be a table, but tables help. And depending on which stakeholder group you're working with at which point in the project, there might be one method of a sequence of operation that is more appropriate than another. We're going to talk about sequence of operations more when we get into the sort of project oversight recommendations that we make. So I'm not going to go super in depth on this right now, but I am going to take a quick moment to highlight for you that if you look in the handout section of the GoToWebinar control panel, you will see we have a couple files we've already sort of pre-uploaded there just to make it really easy for you to check this stuff out. And in partnership with Mia, last year, Lighting Design Lab made some pretty slick one-pager sort of learning guides. We have one entirely on sequence of operations, so I encourage you to check it out. Okay, the next tech term, basic concept, and we're going to spend more time on this one as well, is the configuration tool. Okay, the configuration tool is how most modern NLC systems are set up, how they're programmed, and how they are commissioned. They are increasingly app-based and done, via on a smart device, but not always. And while this job, I'm going to say most of the time falls to somebody at the project level, there are companies that should be noticed that offer this entirely as a service. So, system X might not have a configuration tool, and if you said, well, why not? They'd say, because when you install our system, our people do all of this remotely for you. It's part of the service that we sell you in the package. You don't have to do this. That's how some companies have chosen to go to market. I want to take a quick second on this slide just to make a distinction. When I say setup, programming, and commissioning, a lot of times I will hear people use the word commissioning to refer to all of it, to refer to everything. And like 9 times out of 10, they're probably not creating confusion by using that word. But these are actually 3 very distinct things. Setup is the initial setup of the system when you are pairing devices and matching hardware within the configuration tool. Programming is kind of what you see in the picture here. It's like I'm programming these controls to do this, and these are the configuration settings. And then commissioning would be, we have tenants in the building, we're coming back maybe after a month or 2, 3 months, 6 months, we're making sure the system works the way it was supposed to. We're going back to the sequence of operations, we're talking to the tenants to see if there's any issues, we're dialing in the system. So it's just worthwhile to highlight that here. And as we march forward, it's just worth a moment to pause to highlight to folks, to really reiterate, configuration tools and wall stations are the primary way most modern lighting systems are programmed and used. And here, the reason I have this little Cree SmartCast configuration tool coming up is really just to highlight that most of the examples I'm going to be showing you today are the app-based variety. They're the app-based smart device version of this configuration tool, because that's where the majority of the market is going. But not all of them. And this Cree SmartCast, it's one of the simplest systems, and they've gone a different route. So I'm highlighting that just to share with you. It's not a one path only. Okay, so we're going to launch a quick poll right here. Do you have direct experience working with NLC configuration tools? So let's see here. This is a pretty simple one. And I know in our household, I wanted to get a configuration tool when I was 16 because my older brother had one, but my mom made me wait. Probably was a good thing. Probably would have shot my eye out. Answers are rolling in. The answers are rolling in. Oops, we got some late. Don't need to even put postage on it, folks, if you're voting by mail. We just want to get that stuff in. Okay, there we go. I was waiting until somebody said, Mom says I can't have one. All right, I'm going to close the poll. I'm going to share those results with you real quick. And this is fascinating. So an overwhelming majority of folks have don't have direct experience working with one of these tools. And to that, I would say you're all really, really great candidates for Lighting Design Lab's NLC workshop. We'd love to see you. Because I tell you folks, we're going to talk about configuration tools later, actually. So I'm going to hold I'm going to hold my thoughts, but let me hide those poll results. Really interesting. And right now, we're going to pause and see if there are questions that might have come in. So Katie, anything I should
Hey,
respond
John.
to?
There was a comment by Tony Adams that maybe when referring to wall stations, use comprehensive instead of complex. Um, just the connotation there. But Sean, I think, made a good point that for some people, comprehensive is complex.
No, you know,
and
those are both totally true.
and it does look like maybe a couple people lost audio, but it's back. I've been able to hear you. So if anybody out there is experiencing audio issues, send a note in the chat so we know how widespread it is. But Sean and I can still both hear you loud and clear.
Great. Thanks, Katie. For the next part of this presentation, I am going to really quickly, and I can't emphasize, it's almost a shame how high level I'm going to keep these, but it's absolutely critical utility staff understand these primary control strategies. However, we just simply don't have enough time in an hour to do any of these justice. So let me be totally clear. I'm flying over these, but what I want you to take away is the understanding of, you know, very high level, how these work, why they're important, and you guys know where you can get more information. The first one is this high-end trim. It's all about starting with the right amount of light. It is all too common that, you know, nobody wants to spec lights that might not be bright enough. And so it's very common when the lights first go in, they're much too bright and you have glare and you have issues like that. High-end trim is all about dialing down the initial light output so it matches the task that's going to be completed in that space. And, you know, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So isn't this a lovely looking office and it looks just right and it's even looking out at, you know, I'm guessing there's a beautiful water view right out that window there. And here we're going to imagine the new lights just got installed and it's like, boy, that's pretty bright and glary. And then it's like, well, let's tune it down. Nope, way too dim. Bring it up. We're going for, you know, you guys know this, 30-foot candles on the surface plane for this office, right? Boom, we reached our target level. And so when you reach that target level, you've done your high-end trim. Now, when the occupant, when the tenant comes in, if they were to go to that wall station and hit full lights, well, 100% is now where you've set that high-end trim, right? So that's high-end trim in a nutshell. Great way to save energy, great for overall space comfort. Control method 2, occupancy and vacancy. I know utility folks, you have been you know, working with these rudimentary controls for years. What I want to stress here is, as I have been at the Lighting Design Lab, I have really gained an appreciation, not just for you need to understand the hardware itself, but it's all about the application and how you deploy it so it works for the customer. So it's like, you want to understand when it should be occupancy versus vacancy, or you want to understand when you need a wired solution because maybe passive infrared is not going to get the job done, or just more in general, you want to talk about best practices for how you might zone or group fixtures together so that they react the same way or in unison to occupancy and vacancy modes. We got a class for that. That's like, these things are all critical, but we don't have time for them right now. This is some of the stuff that we teach in our class, and it's paramount for these jobs that these things are dialed in and configured correctly. The next one I'm going to talk about, control method 3, is daylight harvesting. Daylight harvesting, head, shoulders, knees, and toes, wins the naming contest. I feel like high-end trim, like, who came up with that name? Daylight harvesting, it's so fun. It makes me smile every time I say it, right? Daylight harvesting, it's pretty easy to understand. When you got natural light pouring through the windows, you don't want those luminaires at 100%. You want them to sense the natural daylight coming in, and you want them to respond proportionately, right? And so this next little slide here that I'm going to go to, this is one I want utilities to pay attention to, because this is another area where I will sometimes see utilities saying like, well, it needs to be like this, or it needs to be like that. And it's like, don't sweat the small stuff, okay? If you had a networked lighting control configuration, you can see you're going to have these two zones. You're going to group the zones, the luminaires closest to the windows into one zone, and you're going to group the luminaires further back into their own zone. But if you had a luminaire level lighting control system, basically out of the box, that system, it could make each luminaire itself is able to individually detect the amount of light coming through the window and respond accordingly. Now, even though that luminaire lighting control system can have, every luminaire is its own zone, you could also group them together like this if you wanted to. Both of those are acceptable. It's like, this is great, this is great. There's reasons that both work, and this is the sort of thing where it's like, utilities, don't get hung up on this. Like, just make sure they're doing daylight harvesting. Don't sweat this level of stuff so much, right? Okay, and the last one, and hands down the least sexy, is scheduling. And what I like to emphasize, like, we all basically understand what scheduling is and why it's important. I like to emphasize to folks, if you're focusing on these other ones, occupancy, vacancy, high-end trim, daylight harvesting, scheduling is like kind of happening in the background. It's still critical, it's still important. Just about every major system that I have direct experience with makes it very easy to get in and set up the scheduling. So I don't want to marginalize it or say it's, the least important. But I really believe, talking to utilities, it's important to emphasize those first three. Okay, time for a quick poll question to see who is still staying with us here. High-end trim, what does it refer to? High-end trim. Man, I wish I could go get a bougie haircut right now. This stuff is getting long and thick, and it's hot. Can't have long hair when it's hot. Go ahead here. Oh, you guys are crushing this. You guys are crushing this. Nobody has much of a sense of humor on this one. So because you guys are crushing it and doing so great, yes, it is setting light output to the level the space was designed for. But, it could also be a really expensive haircut as well. All right, we're going to keep marching forward here, team. Any other questions, Katie?
Yep. Perry's got a question, I think a really good one. Using daylight for the first strategy, best for the occupant and natural resources environment, sure, but what's in it for the electrician, electrical engineer, and electric utility?
Yeah, that's three different things. So I'm going to try and answer those maybe in reverse order. What's in it for the utility is the energy savings primarily. I mean, that's kind of what's in it for the utility. I could elaborate on that, but that's the main one. When I think about what's in it for the contractor, I'm going to answer that from an implementation maybe standpoint, but I'm actually going to put kind of the contractor and the I believe the question said like the engineer, and I'm interpreting that to be like the person who's specifying the system. So I would say when you use, especially, I'm just going to say more blanket, a luminaire level lighting control, but oftentimes code will require that daylight harvesting is addressed. It'll be a code requirement. Not often, and utility folks, I realize that people talking about codes in Seattle is different than people talking about codes maybe in other parts, other states. But I would say the reason it matters is it's something that helps you comply with code. It will improve tenant comfort. So if you're the person specifying the system or the person responsible for installing that system and you don't want to get callbacks, dialing in daylight harvesting, taking the time to do it right will check the box for code. It increases tenant comfort. And for the utility, it's providing additional reliable energy savings. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay, I'm going to pivot a little bit here. We're going to go to understanding current NLC market trends. And again, like I got crash course here italicized just because we really don't have enough time to really get into all the things that are making this cool. But two areas that I want to take a little bit of a deeper dive on. The first is I want to talk a little bit more about configuration tools and just some of, in my opinion, some of the critical changes that have taken place in the last, even just like last couple years that are game changers. And the second topic I'm going to talk about, I just call it the proliferation of features, because there are so many new features getting added to these systems. And I have just highlighted a couple of them here that I think are cool and ones that matter to utilities or will likely matter to utilities, even if they don't right now. They likely will in the future. I also want to say that I use the opportunity to make my own fun icons for these. And so that is not the ANSI official color tuning icon. I don't know if they have one. That was just something that kind of was funny. All right, cybersecurity too. But you know, we should take it seriously. All right, here we go. So understanding configuration tools, it might sound like hyperbole, and those who know me would be forgiven for thinking I'm going that direction. If I were to tell you, like, we really have only just recently left this old school, almost like manually tapping style of programming devices for the ubiquitous smart device, right? Like, even though we've all had smartphones in our pocket for over a decade now, for lighting configuration tools, this is really pretty recently coming online in a meaningful way. And lest you think I'm being overly dramatic with my little picture of the telegram on the left, well, check this out. Anybody who has installed one of these like little motion detectors at your home, or even, you know, some of the better motion detectors, occupancy or vacancy, you know, switches you might have put in at the wall, you've done this. You know what I'm talking about. You typically, it would be some sort of like, okay, either A, I'm up on a ladder, but I need to get out a jeweler's screwdriver and a monocle to like read the settings and figure out if I've got this thing set up correctly. Or I'm like pushing really tiny buttons, and it would be like press and hold, press, release, press, hold, step, press, hold, step, press, right? It was confusing. It wasn't just confusing to set it up. It was confusing. You didn't have like, okay, do I have it in the right mode right now? You would often, instead of a, you know, interface on an app, you would have the interface would be like a blinking light blinking back at you, and you're counting the blinks to tell you, did I get it right? This has been the world for pairing and programming devices until not that long ago. And in my opinion, and I'm kind of representing the utility shift here of people who are like, I don't come from the lighting background like Sean on the phone does. I come from the utility, so I'm a layman to this stuff. But to me, this is one of the most fundamental critical shifts that has occurred in just the last few years. The rally around configuration tools, and I'm going to say, go one step further and say, you know, especially the app-based configuration tools, it has dramatically improved and made easier. It has made setting up these systems so much easier. And that is important to utilities. It's just important to everybody. Okay. So, configuration tools are great when they provide sort of a straightforward process that leads you along the way. They're great when they provide visual confirmation. They're great when they have help features. Some of them are still really confusing, right? I don't have to tell you that, like, just between the smartphones out there, they all have pros and cons. And I got to emphasize, not every system uses an app. I highlighted the Cree SmartCast system because it's a great system. They don't use an app. I'm going to shift to talk about some of the market trends and dynamics that we're seeing out there on the market. I talked about the proliferation of features. And so I've pulled these numbers just as of this week from the Design Lights Consortium's Network Products QPL, Qualified Products List. They have 48 systems currently listed. So these systems are widely available on the market. They exist. 23, nearly half of those systems are the luminaire level lighting variety. And I'm going to kind of hit just briefly on a couple of these features. And the percentages that you're seeing, those percentages are how many systems on the list have this feature, okay? And the reason, as I talk about these, it'll become clear why it's important. Controls persistence is like you've taken all this time to set up the system and make sure it works right. Well, what happens when power goes out, right? When I reboot the system, am I going to have to do that all again? It's like, no, it's crazy. Well, get a system that has controls persistence, right? It's one of the beautiful things about the QPL is it lets you filter and figure out different system features. Energy monitoring. This is one that because of a requirement that the Design Lights Consortium team worked with stakeholders, worked with industry, was able to put in place, this number has shot way up. 87% of products now have this energy monitoring capability. And that is critical, folks, because anybody who works for utilities knows how expensive and complicated it is to go in and do metering after the fact. So that's just incredible. Cybersecurity, only 10%. What's up with that? Well, this number actually used to be higher. It's in a little bit of flux right now, but what I'm going to just highlight on our brief phone call here is I know from talking to my colleagues at Design Lights Consortium, this is big on their radar. My understanding is that by, I think it's Halloween 2021, there will be a requirement in place. And so we can expect this number to go way up. Companies are dealing with cybersecurity. They're dealing with it in different ways. And part of what is actively happening right now is folks are working to sort of like, what should the standards be? What are the critical things to put in place? And so stay tuned, expect that number to go way, way up, but maybe more importantly, expect the sort of definition and industry understanding of what cybersecurity means, right, to be defined as well. Color tuning, a feature that I think we're going to see increasingly more of, and LDL has a great class on this I'm actually going to reference later. Another feature that is increasing across the board, and then demand response. You know, this is another one. I think less than a year ago, this number was maybe like in the low double digits, but now 64% of products have this capability. So that's pretty cool. These systems aren't just coming online for customers as lighting systems. They have all this additional stuff that's getting worked in, and these are just a few of the systems. So I'm a little bit behind, so I'm going to keep moving forward here. We're shifting into the program design control panel. These are the major sections of the program design control panel. And we're going to start by talking about technical requirements. Now, I just highlighted the Design Lights Consortium, called these folks out for the wonderful work they're doing. Because we have this limited time on the phone, I mean, if I could only say one thing to you about technical requirements, I'd say use this list, leverage this list. There's nobody else in the country doing more work to partner with utilities and industry to bring this forward. And so they've just done a tremendous job. And when I hear like 99% of the time, when I get a question about the list, the vast majority of the time, the system the person is talking about is on the list. All the major systems, I mean, almost every major system is represented on this list. And occasionally I will get like a local OEM or something who will be like, well, I can put this and this and this and this together, and then that's LLLC. And, you know, maybe you can tack all those things together, but one of the things that I'm going to posit is missing is that when you just tack all these individual components together, you might get the system to work for a while, but I do not believe that system is going to work well in a year or 2 years or after the original person who was taught to use the system moves on. There is tremendous value in the documentation, requirements, and you know that DLC helps bring to bear in working with industry. So from Lighting Design Lab perspective, it's just the best place to start, and it makes a ton of sense. The next thing I'm going to talk about is savings tolerance and incentive schemes, right? And it's almost, oops, going the wrong direction here. It's almost criminal that I'm giving this so little time. But here in the Pacific Northwest, we're fortunate enough that we can reference the Regional Technical Forum's non-residential lighting protocol. And they realized that we needed to have some form of provisional savings values that we could apply to our programs just to help jumpstart the programs and make them happen. So projects could happen rather than getting hung up on how much energy is it saving in what room. They gave us these provisional values based on the best information available at the time. And the idea is, as we, the utilities, get more of these projects under our belt, we can share that data, collectively at the regional level and hopefully get better information going forward. And I know we have a little bit of a national audience here, but I was being a little parochial when I put this together because the Lighting Design Lab's conventional footprint is here in the Pacific Northwest, where we have seen a majority of utilities rally around not just prescriptive savings values like the one you see on the screen, but also around prescriptive bonus incentives when NLC or LLLC is being used. And we think that is the best practice. If you can move away from straight custom calculated measure incentives to the prescriptive side, sounds like a no-brainer, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say it. Let me pause for questions right here. We're getting into some good stuff, folks.
Hey, John, there have been a couple of questions that Sean has answered, and since we are a little bit crunched for time, I'll just leave those. And unfortunately, they won't be in this recording, so maybe I'll pull out the text and post that with the handout.
Thanks, Katie. That sounds awesome. I'm going to talk about project oversight next, and that's going to have a quick poll. So we're not going to spend too much time on this, but it's a pretty straightforward question. So which part of project oversight is more meaningful? Counting fixtures in the ceiling to make sure they are there, or verifying the fixtures deploy the primary control strategies that are needed? What do you guys think? The vote is rolling in. You guys are crushing it. The votes are coming. I like it. Okay, this one's like so overwhelming. I'm just going to call it. So, you know what? 90-10. We're just going to call that 90-10. So folks, what's more important? Counting the fixtures in the ceiling to make sure they're there, or reviewing the sequence of operations to make sure the system got set up right? This is the fundamental shift that I think from a programmatic standpoint, I'm really pushing to utilities. With network lighting controls, like unless everybody in the picture is committing wholesale fraud and not installing fixtures and creating fake invoices, counting the fixtures isn't a good way of doing oversight. You might want to verify they're there, but what's way more important is getting some sense of how did this lighting system get programmed? Did you program and set up these primary control strategies? And what you should all be thinking about is there a sequence of operations that I can use to determine, did this stuff like get done, right? So what do you need to document? Like this is, if that's the case, how does a utility conduct a post-inspection? And in a perfect world, you would have this really detailed sequence of operations. You would be walking the site with the programming agent, and you would also have access to like the configuration tool in your hand. But that's just not realistic. You might get that with some jobs, but it's just not realistic to expect that. Let's also remember that not every NLC system uses an app or a smart device, right? So you can't even ask for a screenshot for every single system. Most systems you could, but not for every single system. What I think is a more reasonable approach for utilities to take today is require a pre and post sequence of operations. That way, before the project happens that they have a plan. And when it's done, you can get an as-built, did it change? And then you have something that you can go measure and verify against. It might require that you take some light level readings to verify that high-end trim was done. Documenting that movement settings were done can happen via some screenshots of the tool. Daylighting, that's also a way you could configure that. But I'm going to say it is challenging for some of these systems that don't currently have app-based systems to help provide that documentation. And that is why Lighting Design Lab, with some other program partners, are really pushing this idea for how we're going to do this stuff tomorrow. right? And so increasingly systems, we already talked about this, systems can measure their energy use and report it. That is increasingly becoming a standard feature. So that is something I think that can feed into utility oversight. The second one is we're trying to make sure, or we're working towards a possible hypothetical pie in the sky sort of sequence of operations exportable report. So after the system is programmed and set up, whichever system you're on, you can hopefully say, export this, and it would just create, it'd spit out a little report that said, this room, this many luminaires, this is what was done. This room, this many luminaires, this is what was done. So we are pushing that concept from Lighting Design Lab. Stay tuned. Okay, folks, now I'm going to talk about, this is my favorite part, where we're kind of wrapping it up, market engagement in the Tools and Resources Accelerator. So I got to start by highlighting our flagship workshop, all right? This workshop, I used to say, it's for trade allies and design allies and end-use customers, but the reality, it's for everybody. This is our full spectrum. People learn better. It's dynamic, it's collaborative, it's hands-on. I have been to a handful of these, and every time I go, I learn something new. So I call this the flagship course that LDL offers. I can't recommend it enough. Thank you to all the utility partners on the phone right now who have signed up and hosted one of these workshops. We're going to continue to try and offer a online version that obviously we'll have to cut out a lot of the cool hands-on stuff, but we're working on that right now. So if this is the flagship, right, it works really well. You guys know me, I'm a peacenik, so I call this the suite of NLC educational offerings, but it sure looks a lot, the metaphor works for like a battle group, right? If the 1 day or 2 day workshops that we put on is the carrier, right? Well then tunable light and light and health, these are like Arleigh Burke class destroyers, right? These can operate independently, they can team up, they can be part of a 1 day class. Maybe we got these Ticonderoga class cruisers, power over Ethernet, and NLC for school districts, supporting the fleet, okay? Looks like we got some literal fast combat ships supporting, out in front here. And then, gotta love it, you guys know my Marine background here. NLC for healthcare, that's like the amphibious, take the beaches, right, on the Vanguard. And what's missing? None other than 1/3 of America's nuclear triad communicating the value of NLC, right? So all this stuff comes together. It's not about one single class, getting people to one class. It's about offering this comprehensive approach. Because it's not just that we need to educate end-use customers, design allies, and trade allies, right? And we, the utilities, are there in the middle. But the market size and the dynamics, they warrant this comprehensive approach. Sometimes we need to take the full spectrum approach, like that 1 day workshop that's for everybody. Sometimes we need the targeted approach, right? Let's just talk to school district staff. Let's get to school district staff before some trade ally gets in there trying to hawk them a bunch of TLEDs. And I want to hit on one more topic. In the last epoch, in the last 2 epochs, okay, that I'm going to call TLEDs and T8s before that, we over distilled the message down to, it's all about the decision maker. Get to the decision maker. That doesn't work for NLC. NLC, it's all about the stakeholders. There was that question that came in earlier, and it was like, well, what about this person? What about this person? What about this person? This is one of our learning guides, is entirely about this topic. When you want to espouse the value of NLC, if you just start telling every single conceivable benefit to whichever person you're talking to, it's probably going to sound like a garbled message. And what we recommend from the lab, and this is basically what that course is all about, communicating the value, it helps you take, identify these different stakeholders, identify what is going to matter most to them, how are they going to be impacted, why is this a better system for them, and it sort of lets you work that into a more comprehensive and articulate proposition to that decision maker. We've developed these tools and resources. Many of these are available on our website. A few of them I put right into the GoToWebinar that I mentioned earlier. Really encourage you to check these out. And in addition to these 6 learning guides that we have created, we also have this really awesome video that we made. And the reason this video is so cool to me is it actually demonstrates those primary control strategies. High-end trim is a little bit of an abstract concept, but if you can show people in a 2-minute video, well then they're like, oh, okay, I understand what you're saying. That's not so scary. I can do that. That makes sense. The other really cool thing about this video is that it simulates a tenant improvement, really highlighting system flexibility. So that's pretty cool. And we really designed these with everybody in mind. This isn't like, I mean, these are really basic short videos, so it works for utility staff, but you could send it to a customer, or you could share it with a trade ally if they're like, what do you mean high-end trim? Just to summarize here, you know, this is everything I put in my project sort of program recommendations. The one I want to highlight is the 3rd bullet down. Leverage a sampling of configuration tool screenshots that don't require it. And the reason I say that is because not every system can provide you with those screenshots. So it would be unfortunate to make that a requirement. That video I just referred to, it's so awesome. And yet it only has like, oh man, I closed the poll. My bad, guys. The video I just referred to, it only has like 100 views. And so I was just going to have a poll that said, do you plan to use these tools and resources? But maybe it's better for time's sake. I don't think we have time to do it. So I want to encourage folks though, please do, you know, check those resources out. If you want to use them, they're available for your use. So use them. Let us know if you'd like to, you know, it would be great if it just had X. We'd love to get that feedback. And if you want to use them, please share. We like the stories. So I think that's it for me, Katie. I can field a couple questions and I'll let you take us out of here.
I've got one quick question from Lisa. In light of current conditions, who do you envision post-inspection verifications being conducted by?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't actually think that doing a physical site inspection right after the job happens is the most critical thing. I think if somebody sends in maybe pictures and some screenshots, if that's available. So if they sent in some pictures of a light meter that showed high-end trim had dialed down light levels to 30-foot candles, if somebody showed some screenshots of how the configuration app has been set up, to me, that is just so much more important than physically being there to count the fixtures in the ceiling, although I realize utilities aren't going to let go of that anytime soon. Then hopefully in a year or two, when things get back to normal, hopefully we can go back and we can do a sampling of those buildings, which is how I, you know, that's my recommended approach to oversight in general, is make it less project by project and manage the risk through sampling. Kind of like airport security, right? Like there's a lot of theater oversight, I think, that happens, but the most important stuff, like that, making sure there's a sequence of operations and a plan so we have something to measure against when we can go back, that's the critical piece that shouldn't be missing. Good question though.
All right, that is it. Lynn wants us to know the videos are awesome. Thank you, Lynn. I think so too. And let's thank John. Thank you for giving us all this information. I told you guys he was going to have a lot to say. And thank you, Sean, for fielding questions. I will get those in a document and put them with the handout on the website for those of you who would like that. Here are the upcoming classes that John referenced, especially take a look at that Fundamentals of NLC 2-day series. It's 2 hours each of those days, so it's not too big a time commitment. Those are available to register for on our website, or if you download the handout, I think John linked those to our website too. John's information right there if you want to contact him directly. There's a nice little screenshot of our website, and no, that's okay, John, you can go to the next one. We are run by Seattle City Light. We are Seattle City Light employees. However, thank you to Bonneville Power Administration, Chelan County PUD, Tacoma Power, Idaho Power, and Snohomish County PUD for your support this year. If you are a utility interested in also being listed and thanked by us in front of hundreds of people, get in touch with John, actually.
All right. Thank you so much. Hey, big thank you to everybody who joined us. It's great to just even see your names on the list, and I can't wait till I get to see so many of y'all in person again. So have a great lunch, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll get this posted soon, and reach out with any questions. Thanks to the LDL team for the support, and everybody else, Mia, industry friends, mom and dad, everyone. Okay, guys, I think we're going to call it quits. Thanks so much.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.